How would you organize your Node project for building a RESTful API? What modules or frameworks you would use for routing and handling requests? Okay, now pause and think about your own answer and approach. All right, now I will share my answer. The first point is that I will create separate modules for controllers, routes, models, middlewares, and configuration files. Okay. Second, I will use Express for routing and middleware handling. See, these two steps are very common, and I think they are used in almost every REST API project. Okay. Now, the third step I will take is I will use inbuilt modules like body parser for parsing the request body, helmet for security, Morgan for request logging, and codes for enabling the codes if needed. Okay. And this third step is optional and basically based on your requirements. You can manipulate this point as per your own experience, project experience. Okay. For example, if you have not used helmet, so don't say it. Okay, it's not mandatory. Great, that is the answer to this question. And but no, not the answer actually, it is the idea or the suggestion, you can say. Your answer can be something different, and that's completely fine. Describe the steps you would take to implement user authentication in Node application. What strategies or libraries would you consider for secure authentication? Again, pause for a few seconds and think about your own answer. Tick tick 1, tick tick 2. Now listen to my answer. I will share few points here which are like only the suggestions steps, okay, for implementing user authentication. The first step is to select the authentication strategy. Choose either session based or token based JWT authentication, anyone you can choose. The second step is pick libraries. Choose Passport.js or JWT libraries for token based authentication, okay. The third step is middleware integration. Yes, integrate the authentication middleware into routes using your middlewares. Okay, and you know that the authentication will happen at the middleware level only, right? The fourth step is password security. Hash the passwords securely using the bcrypt or something similar. I already covered how to create hash and salt password using the bcrypt library to make the passwords more secure, right? The fifth step is create the user model. Yes, define a model or schema for user data like username, fields. Create a model, okay? And the last step is root protection. Secure routes by requiring authentication. Meaning, see, authenticated routes should be nested separately. Okay, other than the other normal routes where authentication is not required. So they should be separate. Okay, and I already covered this in past nested routes question, I think. Great. Again, these are like the suggestions for implanting your user authentication. And remember one thing, if you do not know anything, don't say it in interviews. For example, if you do not know the hashing password concept, so don't say it, say some other thing which you know better in a better way. So in short, just say the words which you can explain a little bit. Okay. Describe the steps you would follow to deploy a Node application to a production environment. How would you manage the dependencies, the environment variables, and monitor the application in production? Again, think. Now, let me share my own approach. First, I will prepare the application for deployment by organizing the dependencies, configuration file, and building scripts. Basically, I will make sure that application is 100% ready and everything is in place, especially the configuration files for the database connection and all. Okay. Second step is to choose a hosting provider and set up a server or like a containerized environment. For example, Docker, AWS, Azure, Heroku. So set up them, and I already covered the idea of Docker and hosting providers in previous questions also, right? Then third step is to configure the environment variables for sensitive information like database credential. Yes, to store sensitive information like database server address, username, password, there are multiple ways to store them, and I personally prefer the cloud techniques, but environment variables are the most basic and old ones, so you can use them or any other technique. The fourth step is to monitor the application in production using logging, metrics, alerting tools to ensure basically the health and performance. See, there are many profile tools available for production analysis and monitoring. Okay, so you can use any one of them. All right. Obviously, I can't explain each and everything in detail here because there are multiple ways of deployment, and I don't know which way you will prefer. And you have to basically explain your own preferred way. But this is like a very ideas. This is like the ideas for the deployment. So that's the answer. Your Node application needs to interact with the MongoDB database. How would you handle database transactions and ensure the data integrity? Again, pause and think about the answer. Okay, so first of all, database integrity meaning that any point of time your data should not be compromised. For example, bad and invalid data should not enter into your database. That is first thing. For example, suppose and if two transactions are happening at the same time, then in the case of power failure, both transactions must be rolled back. It's not like that one transaction succeeded and another was rolled back. That will create the problem. Okay. Now, here are the 4 steps that I will take care for the transaction based node application. First step is use the official MongoDB node driver or any ODM library like Mongoose. Mongoose to interact with the database. Mongoose for transaction based application is a very good idea. Okay. Second, use schema validation via the Mongoose to avoid invalid data insertion inside your database. Okay. Third point is use transactions to ensure atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability properties. So these asset properties are important for transactions, and that also you can do it by the Mongoose. Fourth, handle the error conditions and rollbacks gracefully to maintain the data integrity. Okay, and this I explained earlier also. Great, that is the answer to this question. How to secure your node application? What security measures would you implement? Think. Here are the 5 suggestions from my side. First, enforce the HTTPS encryption for securing data. Okay, don't use just HTTPS. Okay. Second, implement input validation and sanitize user inputs to prevent injection attacks like SQL injection XXX. I already covered in previous questions. Third, use encryption algorithms and libraries like encrypt, decrypt, basically to secure the sensitive data. Okay, like passwords. So that also I covered, like hashing the password, right? Fourth, implement secure authentication and authorization mechanism to control access to sensitive resources. Yes, yeah, your web page sensitive resources things should be secured, okay, via the authentication and authorization. That also I covered previously. The fifth point is to regularly update dependencies and libraries to patch security vulnerabilities. See, don't use the older versions of the inbuilt and third party modules in your project. So keep on refreshing them and use the latest one. Okay, great. These are the 5 points, and yes, your answer can be a bit different than mine. You can add few more points, and that's completely fine because different projects have different setups and different experiences, right? So these questions answers can be different.